Helldivers 2 has announced the Escalation of Freedom update, which is actually not how they normally do things, right? They don't tell people about patches and new content, and of course, given all the talk of player counts going on, it's a pretty interesting situation. Now, maybe they should talk to the people over at Digital Extremes, the creators of Warframe, who've got themselves a little bit in the news. They've been pretty happy, right, to talk about their wisdoms from the very early years of the game. Thing is, though, when you look at their advice and then look at, say, the recent game that they just jettisoned themselves from pretty damn early, yeah, it's a little bit awkward. And then there's the final story. Sega taking someone to court for going too far. What's not too far, though, is Bellular.games. It's right in the video description. There, you can get videos ad-free, you can support our team, and get Loading Screen, which is our daily publication. Yeah, every single day. And for us, it seriously makes a difference. So thank you. Let's get in. The Escalation of Freedom then. So 6 months after the launch of Helldivers 2, it is in a interesting little situation. Audience numbers are settling in and around 30k. Sometimes it's dipping lower, and when it hits a new low, that tends to, generate a few articles, few YouTube videos. Now, generally speaking, right, what we understand is the audience is about 75% Steam, 25% PlayStation. And of course, that's post PSN linking, general stability issues, all that kind of thing. Now, the player numbers weren't overly impacted by PSN linking, like in a very immediate sense. We actually did a fairly deep dive into the numbers there, but that said, it didn't really help. I mean, yes, it got Helldivers all over the news, absolutely everywhere, but not really for a great way. I think what we are primarily seeing, though, is a fairly natural decline, right? A natural decline that, yes, had been hastened by a few things. Things we've already talked about, so let's focus on the future. 6 months is generally the time where a game is quite settled into its core audience, the people who will stick around, and essentially that's when games start to talk about or deliver their larger updates. What we see then is this, the Escalation of Freedom. It is launching on the 6th of August, and it is not a season or a battle pass / warbond thing. The warbonds in particular are interesting. They're actually being spaced out, right? A bit different from their month-long sort of situation of the game launch. So this is an update, just an update. And it having a full marketing barrage is interesting. I think it does signify a little bit of a switch. Helldivers was praised for having subversive marketing. Content basically wouldn't be publicized. What would happen is the content would be pushed into the game, then people would find it, right? And then they would talk about it, and that would turn into a big community event that would then get everybody talking across the internet. But now that's not happening. So what's coming in this update basically is a new highest difficulty, new mission objectives, new enemy types, and new maps. In particular, they showed off this more like spooky looking version of the swamp, which I do think is pretty nice. And as well, there's a bunch of quality of life features. Now, the thing is, right, barring the difficulty, this is literally the content that would have been provided during any given period between Warbond releases, right? All those above things, they just would be happening in a drip feed manner. The difference here is instead of a drip feed, and us finding out things as it happens, we're now getting this all at once. That is the main difference here, and that basically means that they are having to change their plans up. The initial marketing system that was built off mystery and surprise, that is taking a backseat to basically consistency and outreach to their player base. And that consistency and communication will actually matter. If audiences know what's coming, then they can set their expectations a little bit more clearly. Perhaps the live service could be a little bit better received. That should, in theory, mean some less disappointments when output from the development team don't match the dreams of fans, because again, that very amazing first 2-month experience where everything was new and fresh and surprising, in a way that could never last. And I suppose the strengths of the way that game launched and how so much stuff was naturally discovered, I think that fed an absolutely amazing explosion with the game. The thing is, though, in many ways that's going to be kind of unsustainable. Now, a little bit of that going on is absolutely going to be a good thing for just keeping the sort of week-to-week, day-to-day retention of the game going, right? And in the past video on this, I talked about how, yes, its Steam numbers are way down. But again, what makes you not consider yourself a player of a game? When Helldivers 2 is brand new and fresh and people are grinding up the entire progression of the game, getting all of their stratagems, their ship upgrades, yeah, they're going to be able to just keep on playing, especially as they're ascending up those difficulty levels. So That's what it's going to be like at launch. Now a bunch of those players will maybe play a few times a week. And when they do play, they probably won't have as high session times, which is obviously going to mean way fewer concurrents. Now, that I think then shifts this game into playing, well, the more traditional game, right? What they were doing at launch essentially meant that the peak kept on being extended. I think as well because it almost had the effect of an artificial waitlist because their servers could only handle so many players. So there was all of this pent-up demand that then led to a bunch of like playtime being, I think, spread across 2 weeks very highly. Now, though, there's just not the progression and the variety for people to be playing this game 30 hours, 20 hours a week, or any crazy shit like that. It's just not possible. And that means instead of everything being in-game, they now need to go to their fans and reactivate them, and that is basically what this strategy is meant to do. As I said last time, they have a few real big things they can do. They can start to have things come close to Super Earth, right? They could have a battle on the moon. They could have a battle on Super Earth. That would be the real crazy stuff. The other big thing they could pull is bringing in the third enemy faction from the previous game. So we'll have to see what goes on, but very much expect them to be leveraging their large quantity of like total players, not necessarily concurrents right now, and their very good brand recognition to just do more traditional marketing that can cut through to people. The next thing then, still very much live service, it is Digital Extremes and Warframe. So VGC had an interview with Steve Sinclair, who is the CEO of the company. They make Warframe. It is probably one of the world's more successful live service games. And this is all following them showing off Warframe 1999 at TennoCon, which, I mean, yeah, looks fairly interesting. And also their fantasy game, Soulsframe, which, gotta say, I mean, yeah, Soulsframe, I'm kind of interested in that. Now, this is all interesting to us because Warframe was not a particularly amazing launch. It was rocky. They put in a hell of a lot of work and some pretty incredibly expensive microtransactions if you want to do them. But basically the bit that cut through to the news is Sinclair talking about other companies not sticking to their guns with live service releases, right? The whole thing basically being, hey, our game was a shit show when it came out. It had loads of problems, but we stuck with it and then it was good. The particular quote from him is this: they think the release is make or break and it's not. They have a financial way to be persistent and they never do it. It comes out, doesn't work, and they throw it away. It's a shame when you put so many years of your life into iterating in those systems or building technology or building the start of a community, and because the operating costs are high, you get terrified when you see the numbers drop and leave. We've seen this with amazing releases that I think have massive potential, and I think they eject too soon. And I guess for a lot of people, they start to think, what would have happened if they actually picked up the Anthem Next project? Or the same question for so many other games. So you get the point. Could Lawbreakers have survived? Maybe I could think that. But the reason why this has raised eyebrows, though, is because Digital Extremes closed their entire publishing division after the launch of Wayfinder last year. Wayfinder, which didn't really have a great launch. Then also from their past was the likes of The Amazing Eternals, which is something that I'm pretty sure most people don't even remember. I certainly didn't, but yes, this happened in 2017. It had low player numbers, and yeah, they basically just gave up on it, and they refunded people 2 months after the launch. So it's a bit weird because with Wayfinder, with that other project, they do sort of seem like the kind of circumstances that Sinclair was talking about in the interview. Thing is, though, they are a company who do know what they are talking about, so there could be factors that led to all of that other stuff going bad that we don't know about. I suppose, though, and I guess why we thought it was interesting to include this in a roundup episode that also had the Helldivers stuff. Yes, Helldivers 2 has definitely cratered in terms of concurrent players. That being said, again, concurrency is different to DAUs. DAUs different to weekly active users. I think their weekly active users, they're probably better than the concurrency suggests, given, I think, the type of game. And I suppose what that basically means is play their cards right, and they can probably move that in the other direction. So what's that going to look like? And I think it's particularly notable when we've got Warframe involved, because Warframe, like when I remember Warframe, it is you go down through a corridor and you kill things, and that's it. It's going down corridors, killing things game. That is not what Warframe is at all these days, because they have added so much to that game experience. So I guess with Helldivers 2, what are they going to do? I doubt it will be PvP. I don't think they're set up to do that, and they've pretty much said that's not what they want to do. So can they just keep on adding content to it, to the same thing? Or do they have to start to do things that properly change up how the game actually feels to play. Add more types of progression. Do they maybe need to break it into yearly seasons and have it so that instead of it just being an endless, you know, the war is forever and that's it, which of course forever means nothing, in the same way that, yes, No Man's Sky at the start had, you know, functionally infinite planets, but, you know, they all kind of feel sort of the same. So what do? Can they have a forever war, or do they start actually needing to put stakes into things? I think stakes are probably the way to go. And I suppose stakes are what Sega, in a very different time, would drive through the people they're angry with. But no, now that's done in the legal system. So basically, Sega are drawing a little bit of a line in the sand. They have taken somebody to court for excessive slanderous and insulting comments on social media against one of our employees for a long time. And the thing is, this is not the usual, like, communication from an audience. This is beyond what they call warm encouragement, scolding, and sometimes even harsh comments about our products and services that they say they welcome. This case, right, went to court. A judge agreed that this should actually escalate, and the harasser was sued for damages for the employee. So this is basically a firm, publicized material action taken by Sega against somebody who very much broke the social contract around communications with devs to staff. And I suppose it probably does raise a few questions, but I think ultimately if you keep on acting in an unhinged manner that is specifically targeted at somebody, and, you know, if you make it your mission to basically, like, fuck up their life, then yeah, there's probably a role for the state and the legal system for that. So I think this is probably quite useful as a sign for staff who will now feel a bit protected, where if somebody does, like, kind of cross the line, that something will actually happen. And I mean, for the audience, some people will know, oh, maybe I won't overstep and go absolutely crazy. But also I think for audiences, they often will want the bad apples to be kind of like to be removed, because an audience doesn't really want that stuff being there. I mean, you know what it's like when you feel passionately about something and somebody who, I suppose, ostensibly has got the same opinion as you, absolutely, you know, takes it way too far. And then you get quite frustrated because you basically think, cool, you've just set the cause back by acting like a massive dick. And this is actually something that has happened a few times lately, right? As an example with Destiny, last year, a continued, targeted, racially motivated sort of spate of harassment against a community manager had them take the aggressor to court for a 490 grand settlement, which is quite something. And I guess it does lead into some statistics. Okay, GDC, a lot of game developers go there, and there was a survey of 2,300 attendees. You know, if you're going to GDC, there's going to be a little bit of a selection bias there, and I don't mean that in some weird culture war way, by the way. I literally mean financial means to actually go and do that. So it's going to be, I suppose, a little bit more biased towards current professionals in the industry. Maybe it won't have as many sort of like hobbyists, you know, stuff like that. Anyway, 91% of developers think that player harassment and toxicity is something that affects their work. 41% responding to the survey said that they would class it as a very serious issue in the industry. 40% of the 2,300 people said that they had experienced harassment, and those minority groups made up the vast proportion of those impacted. I suppose it would have been good to know, like, what percentage of the 40% is that, but anyway. 68% said that their employers had actually addressed behavior from the audiences, 30% via internal methods, 4% via external methods, and 34% via a combination. That is kind of interesting to me. Honestly, you don't, I mean, that 34%, that 4% of, you know, external methods only, you don't really hear stories of that as much. I mean, obviously, I've just covered two of them, right, with Bungie and Sega. I suppose now we're very much not in the 20% of developers who basically said that their company had done nothing about the problem. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, it really is an actual problem in the industry. Look, trash talk, that's fine. Everybody's okay with trash talk. I mean, even take the League of Legends related story. No, it wasn't. It was Valorant. The person, like, doing the video, or like hosting the video, was she the studio manager for Valorant? I forget exactly. But like, you know, overtly was like, no, trash talk's totally okay. So it's not that. I think it is, though, something that's interesting and a little bit unique to games. And that is that we're pretty customer facing as an industry. I mean, if you just go and work in tech, you're not going to be that customer facing, are you? You're not. Whereas it's very different. Like, the audience relationship is very different within games. I suppose it's also being slurped up into, honestly, a modern internet culture that is getting aggressive in a way that it does feel different to what it was 10 or 15 years ago. Like, 10 or 15 years ago, I mean, yeah, you could certainly say there's still a bunch of really bad shit going on, but I don't know, man. Some of it felt in better humor to me, whereas now, to be honest with you, I just don't find a lot of those online spaces to be as enjoyable or like truly banterous, with banter being banter, as they kind of used to be. It all just does seem a lot more charged and nasty, where, I don't know, I suppose like differences of opinion are now somehow like slights, and people get really angry because they disagree about things, and I don't know. It's very silly indeed. But it is a problem this industry will have to deal with, because guess what? Other industries who are not as customer facing, and in many cases can actually pay more money, well, they can just slurp up people. You can say, hey, would you like to have more money and less bullshit? And a lot of people will say, yes, I would love more money and less bullshit. Fantastic. And I mean, I can point to so many examples, be it people that I know, of just, hey, I quit games, I moved to tech, I moved to something else, and my whole life is better. Which, I mean, it's not just this particular thing we're talking about. I think a lot of it is just the state of corporate governance in games isn't as good, and many factors. Anyway, let's not solve the entire world in the scope of one YouTube video. So with that, let me know what you think. What would bring you back to Helldivers 2? What's the kind of thing that you think could reinvigorate that live service? Consistently, we see that it's the PvP-oriented games that just end up, you know, constantly being the charts forever. It's very rare for PvE to do that. So, outside of PvP, which the game's not geared up or designed for, what do you think could actually get that meaningfully high for a long time? Let me know, and with that said, I'll catch you next time.